One stormy night, a lone gunslinger named Ethan stumbled into a small town, beaten by the desert winds. In the saloon he met Clara, the mayor's proud daughter. Their first words cut like knives, yet behind the sparks, everyone saw something deeper. When raiders came, Ethan stood at the front lines, and Clara saw not a drifter, but a man willing to bleed for others. Under the stars, they drew closer, laughter hiding longing, fingers almost touching, but the kiss never came. When the danger passed, Ethan saddled his horse. Clara begged him to stay. But he only shook his head. Trouble follows me wherever I go. And so he rode into the night, never looking back, leaving behind a love as true as any, yet destined to remain only a memory. The desert storm came without mercy, a wall of dust and wind chasing Ethan across the flats until the outline of a town rose from the haze. His horse stumbled onto the main street, flanks caked in sand. Ethan dismounted with the weary steadiness of a man used to struggle and pushed through the saloon doors, carrying the storm with him like a second skin. The room fell silent. His coat was torn, his grey eyes sharp beneath the brim of a weather-beaten hat. He was a stranger, and strangers drew attention. Among all the stares, one held him. Clara! She stood beneath the lantern glow, the mayor's daughter in a crimson gown trimmed with lace. Her emerald eyes were proud, her chin lifted as though she owned the very air he breathed. Ethan's gaze met hers, and something unspoken flared, heat disguised as contempt. Words followed. Ethan, low and mocking, called her a spoiled lady who had never known hunger or dust. Clara smiled, blade sharp. And you're just a nameless drifter, no honor, no roots. The room hushed. Their insults struck like sparks, but in the pauses, their eyes lingered too long, betraying the storm beneath. That night, when raiders swept into town, Ethan stepped into the street with calm precision. His revolver spoke faster than words, each shot felling an enemy before the flames could spread. Clara watched from the doorway, her pride faltering as she saw the truth of him, a man who stood his ground when others fled. He fought not for gold or glory, but because he could not stand aside. When the dust cleared, the town was scarred but alive. Later, Clara knelt beside him among the wounded. Her hands pressed cloth to his bleeding shoulder while he tied a bandage in silence. Their fingers brushed, and neither pulled away. The quiet between them spoke louder than any quarrel. In the days that followed, they crossed paths again. She brought food to the weary, and somehow he was always near, his dry humor coaxing laughter she didn't expect. He teased her pride, she struck back with words that burned but carried warmth. The town whispered what they denied, that scorn had become something deeper. One evening they walked beyond the town's edge. The desert stretched beneath a sky thick with stars. Ethan looked at her longer than he should have, and she did not look away. Their fingers met, hesitant and trembling, as though another breath might turn it to confession. She laughed softly at his rough jokes, and he felt his chest ache with a hope he'd long forgotten. But dawn did not spare them. With his saddle packed, Ethan stood at the edge of town, his horse pawing the dust. Clara ran to him, her proud voice breaking. "Stay," she whispered, reaching for his hand. "Please? I don't want you to go." His grey eyes held storms too old for healing. He cupped her hand, then let it slip away. "Trouble follows me," he murmured. "I can't stay." Then he mounted his horse, the rising sun burning his silhouette into memory. Clara stood on the empty road, her crimson gown whipping in the morning wind. She felt hollow, yet her heart burned with the certainty that what had passed between them was real. And in the years to come, the town would whisper of the proud daughter and the wandering drifter, two souls bound by love that could never remain. The days after Ethan's departure stretched like years for Clara. She walked the town streets with practiced grace, chin lifted, smile composed, each step heavy with the weight of being the mayor's daughter. Yet inside, emptiness ached. She still heard the echo of his boots, the edge in his voice, the quiet gentleness when his fingers brushed hers over a bandage. She told herself it meant nothing, that he was only a drifter, but her heart betrayed her with every breath. The townsfolk did not let her forget him. They whispered in corners, at the market, even in church. The stranger who saved us. The gunslinger with storm gray eyes. And always, the way he looked at the mayor's daughter. Clara turned away, pretending not to hear, though each word cut deep. She had felt that gaze, burning, uncertain, and it had left its mark. At night she sat by her window, staring at the horizon where desert met stars. She wondered where he rode now, if he thought of her when the firelight flickered across his face. Sometimes she laughed bitterly. "Foolish girl," she whispered. "Falling for a man who never stays." But the laughter turned to tears no one saw. Far beyond the town, Ethan rode alone. The desert stretched silent but for wind and hoofbeats. He told himself he'd done right, leaving her spared her grief. Still, her voice haunted him like a prayer. "Stay. Please? I don't want you to go." Loneliness pressed on him heavier than the miles. At night his campfire burned small, its warmth barely reaching. He remembered her laughter, her unguarded smile, the way she hadn't looked away beneath the stars. He tried to bury the memory, as he had so many others. But Clara was different. She had seen him not as a drifter, but as a man, and that truth refused to die. Back in town, Clara tended the sick, managed her father's gatherings, smiled at suitors she could not care for. Pride demanded she forget, but her heart clung to fragments of memory. The town thought her strong. Only in solitude did the cracks show. Weeks passed. Still she waited, though she'd never admit it, dreaming of hearing boots on wood again, of turning to find those grey eyes watching her. But the road stayed empty, and the whispers grew crueler. He left her. She was nothing to him. Clara bore it all with lifted chin, though her heart knew the truth, he had been everything. Under the vast desert sky, Ethan reached the same truth. Distance did not sever what had grown between them. It only deepened the longing. And so two hearts beat apart, bound by silence, by pride, and by the cruel certainty that love had taken root where it had no right to grow. Months passed, yet the memory of Ethan lingered in Clara's chest like a thorn that refused to heal. She hid it behind her smile, the proud lift of her chin, the endless duties of the mayor's daughter. But at night she turned toward the horizon where the desert met silence and wondered if she would ever see him again. She told herself she no longer cared, but her heart betrayed her in every restless dream. One evening, as the sun bled gold across the rooftops, a familiar figure rode into town. The sound of hooves on boards made Clara's heart falter. Ethan dismounted with the same steady grace, dust clinging to his coat, grey eyes shadowed beneath a weathered hat. He looked older, wearier, yet the sight of him struck her like lightning. The townsfolk welcomed him with wary curiosity. Clara stood on the saloon porch, hands clenched at her sides. Their eyes met across the street. For a moment the world narrowed to just them, the proud daughter and the drifter who had left her. Her silence carried accusation, his gaze, regret. Inside, their first words were a duel. She asked, coolly, why he had come back. He said the road had led him here, nothing more. But his voice trembled with something unsaid. Clara laughed sharply, masking the ache. She told him she hadn't missed him. He smirked, saying he'd expected nothing less. Yet between their words burned unspoken longing. Days followed where fate forced them together. She oversaw supplies, he offered help. Their arguments flared over trifles, how to stack crates, how to treat a child, each quarrel leaving them breathless, each glance longer than pride allowed. At night she thought of his smirk, his voice, the way he watched her as if no one else existed. One evening the saloon filled with music. A fiddler played, couples danced. Clara meant to stay aside, but when Ethan offered his hand, rough and steady, her refusal caught. She accepted with a tilt of her chin, eyes daring him to falter. Their steps were sharp, almost combative, yet the closeness between them told another story. The crowd whispered, watching her gown brush his coat, their eyes locked as though no one else remained. When the music slowed, the world held its breath. Ethan's hand rested at her back, his gaze drifted to her lips. Clara's heart raced, her pride cracked. It seemed inevitable, but she stepped back, breaking the spell. Tears glimmered as she turned away. Outside, she pressed her hand to her chest, cursing herself for weakness. Inside, Ethan sat silent, staring at the door she'd left through, eyes heavy with words unspoken. And so their reunion became another battlefield, pride against longing, anger against love. They had found each other again, yet the distance between them still stretched as wide as the desert that once parted their paths. The weeks after Ethan's return blurred into something Clara could not name. She told herself she hated him, that every sharp remark proved her disdain. Yet in the market she lingered when he lifted barrels for the merchants, on the street, the tilt of his hat and faint curl of his lips stayed with her long after he passed. Her anger was not pure, it tangled with longing, woven with fear she dared not face. Ethan felt the same unrest. He kept his distance, telling himself it was better that way, but her presence drew him like a flame. He remembered the night beneath the stars, her laughter in the desert air, the warmth of her hand brushing his. He tried to bury those memories, but each glance from her emerald eyes unearthed them again. One evening, fate placed them together. Clara slipped from the mayor's house seeking solitude by the pastures. She sat on the wooden fence, her crimson gown glowing in the twilight. Ethan found her there, leaning silent against a post. Neither spoke at first, the air between them carried the weight of all they'd left unsaid. At last she asked, "Why did you come back?" Her voice was calm, though her heart raced. Ethan's grey eyes lingered on her. "I told myself it was the road," he said quietly. "But maybe I was lying." The honesty startled her, and for the first time, she softened. Their meetings became secret things, stolen at dusk or beneath the stars. They spoke of small matters, her childhood, his wandering, but beneath each word ran something forbidden. She laughed at his dry humor, and he marveled at how her laughter made the night less empty. She teased him about the shadows in his eyes, and he admired the fire in her voice. Days turned into nights where their paths crossed too often to be chance. Once, he walked her home. When their hands brushed, neither pulled away. Another time, she brought food to a widow, and he was already there tending the fire. Their eyes met, and the silence filled with tenderness neither dared to name. But secrecy was its own prison. Clara saw the whispers, the questions in her father's eyes. To be the mayor's daughter and love a man with no name, it was madness. Yet her heart betrayed her every time Ethan entered the room. He was danger, and she could not turn away. One night, under the desert stars, the dam broke. Clara's laughter faded as Ethan reached for her hand, and this time, he didn't let go. His touch was rough, uncertain, yet unbearably gentle. Their fingers intertwined, and she felt the truth pierce her soul. She belonged with him, even if it meant ruin. Ethan's voice was low, raw. "You deserve better than me." Clara shook her head, eyes blazing. Better doesn't matter. Her defiance, once her shield, now fought for him. Beneath the starlit sky, the proud daughter and the weary drifter finally surrendered to the tenderness they could no longer deny. Whispers moved faster than bullets in the frontier town. By now every ranch hand, shopkeeper, and woman at the well had seen the way Clara's emerald eyes followed Ethan, the drifter who lingered too long near the mayor's house, the man whose presence softened her laughter. Murmurs turned to bold gossip, the mayor's daughter and the nameless wanderer. For Clara, each word was a knife, not from shame, but from fear of the storm that would come once her father knew. It didn't take long. One evening, the mayor waited in the parlor, hands gripping the chair's arms, his face hard as stone. "You will not see that man again," he said coldly. Clara stood tall. "He is not what they say." Her voice trembled. His answer cut through her plea. "He is nothing. He has nothing. And he will not drag my daughter into the dirt of his wandering life." Ethan felt the pressure too. Men like the mayor could crush more than pride, they could ruin a woman's name. When he met Clara in secret behind the saloon, his voice was low with guilt. "You shouldn't be seen with me. It's not fair to you." Her chin lifted in defiance. "Let them talk." But Ethan shook his head. "You deserve better than whispers and ruined chances." Their quarrels grew sharper. pride and love tangled into painful knots. You fight men with guns, Clara spat, but you're afraid of loving me. Ethan's reply was bitter, loving you would destroy you. The word struck harder than any bullet. They avoided each other after that, though each step apart ached like a wound that would not heal. The gossip turned cruel. Men muttered that Clara had fallen, women pitied and envied her in equal measure. She bore it with her chin high, but the humiliation burned. She hated the lies, and more, the truth, that she could not let him go. One evening, beneath a blood-red sunset, they met again at the edge of town. Silence lay heavy between them. "Say it," Clara whispered. "If you don't want me, say it, and I'll walk away." Ethan's grey eyes searched hers, shadowed by sorrow. "I want you more than anything," he said at last. "But I can't take your life down with mine." Her tears came hot and furious. She turned before he could see, her crimson gown catching the dying light. Ethan stood frozen, every part of him straining to call her back, but his voice failed. The choice had been made, not by love, but by fear. And so they lived the cruelest truth: sometimes the heart does not break from hatred, but from loving too much in a world that will not allow it. The silence after their quarrel was heavier than any words. Clara walked through town with her chin high, her gowns pressed, her voice steady. To the people, she remained the mayor's daughter, composed, untouchable. But when night fell, she sat by her window, staring at the empty road. Her fingers traced the sill as if his warmth still lingered. The laughter he'd drawn from her, the defiance he'd sparked, it echoed like a song she couldn't silence. She told herself it was over. That it must be. She whispered the words as if repetition might make them true. Yet when she passed the saloon, her eyes searched for the tilt of his hat, the sound of his boots. She hated herself for waiting, and him more for making her heart wait. Ethan had ridden far beyond the town, telling himself distance would save her. Each mile was meant to protect her, yet the desert only magnified his emptiness. At night, by the small glow of a campfire, Clara returned to him, her laughter, her defiance, the tremor in her voice when she begged him to stay. He had faced death 100 times, but the memory of her broke him in ways bullets never could. The town moved on. People spoke of harvests, trade, the dull rhythm of frontier life, but whispers lingered, soft and cruel. He left her. She was nothing to him. Clara bit her tongue rather than answer. They could not know the truth, that he had loved her too much to stay. That burden was hers alone. Weeks became months. Clara filled her days tending the sick, teaching children, walking the market with a polite smile. Yet even in kindness, she felt the hollow echo of his absence. She missed not only the man, but the way he made her feel alive, seen, defiant. With him, she had been more than the mayor's daughter. She had been herself. Far from town, Ethan's nights grew long. He hunted, patched his coat, rode through endless valleys, but in every flicker of fire, he saw her face. In the wind, he heard her voice, "Stay." His pride said he'd done right. His heart argued louder. One evening, Clara sat in her father's garden, the air heavy with sage and sunset. She closed her eyes and imagined his rough voice beside her. When she opened them, there was only silence, and the ache that never faded. Then came the rumors, a stranger seen near the outskirts, grey eyes beneath a weathered hat. A gunslinger who rode like a man burdened by ghosts. Clara's heart stilled. She told herself not to hope. Yet that night, staring at the horizon, her lips formed a silent prayer. Because even if she'd never admit it, every beat of her heart still whispered his name. The night he returned was different. The air felt heavier, charged with something unspoken. Clara heard the whispers before she saw him, "The drifter is back." She told herself not to look, not to care. But when she stepped onto the saloon porch and met his storm-grey eyes, the world fell away. For a heartbeat, all the longing and silence of the months apart led to this moment. They spoke little at first. Words felt fragile, too weak for what hung between them. Clara's voice was sharper than she meant. "Why come back?" Ethan's reply was quiet, almost broken. I thought I could forget you. I was wrong. The honesty disarmed her pride, left her breathless. That evening they walked beyond town, where the desert stretched beneath a jeweled sky. The silence trembled with confession. When Clara's hand brushed his, he didn't pull away, his fingers closed around hers, rough and certain, as though letting go would mean dying. When he kissed her, it wasn't gentle, it was fierce, desperate, the collapse of months of pride and pain. She answered with equal fire, her hands in his hair, her body against his. Then the fierceness melted into tenderness, into the ache of two souls who had waited too long. Through her tears she whispered, "I thought you were too proud to admit it." He smiled against her lips. "Pride never mattered with you." They spent the night together in the small room above the saloon. Every word a vow, every touch a confession. Clara said she had never stopped loving him, not even when he broke her heart. Ethan, voice unsteady, confessed he had fled because losing her terrified him more than death. "I've lived alone all my life," he said, tracing her cheek. "But with you, I wanted more." For a few stolen hours, there was no town, no whispers. Only them, the drifter and the mayor's daughter, tangled in love that felt like both salvation and ruin. Clara clung to him as though dawn would tear him away, and feared it would. At first light, Ethan sat silently, watching her sleep. His heart ached with the truth, he loved her more deeply than he thought possible, but his life, his shadows, would one day destroy her. Clara stirred, eyes soft with trust. "Stay," she whispered, the same plea that had haunted him for months. Ethan kissed her forehead, voice heavy as stone. "If I stay, I'll take your future with me." Her tears came quietly. She only held him tighter, as though holding could delay the inevitable. That night had been theirs alone, the one night where love outweighed pride, where truth outweighed fear. But both knew, it was also the last. Dawn came too soon. Clara awoke to the sound of Ethan fastening the saddle straps on his restless horse. The air was cool, painted in pale gold, yet heavy with a silence that crushed her chest. She rushed down the steps, the hem of her crimson gown catching dust, her voice breaking against the stillness. "Don't go," she whispered, a plea and a command all at once. Ethan turned, his storm-grey eyes softened in a way she had never seen. For a long moment he said nothing. The sun rose behind him, throwing his figure into shadow, a silhouette carved from longing and regret. At last he spoke, voice raw. "Clara, if I stay, I'll ruin you. Trouble follows me, and I won't drag you into it." She stepped closer, her trembling hand reaching for his. "I don't care about trouble," she said, fierce through tears. "I care about you. Isn't that enough?" The word struck him harder than any bullet. He wanted to surrender, to let her be the home he'd never known. But he already saw the cost, her name tarnished, her heart breaking each time he rode into danger. Ethan closed his eyes and pressed his forehead to hers, a gesture too fragile for the world to bear. "You deserve a life I can't give you," he murmured. She shook her head, but he gently pulled her hand from his. His fingers lingered, unwilling to let go until they must. The horse stamped impatiently, the sky brightening with every heartbeat. Clara's tears glistened as she watched him mount, her chest heaving with silent sobs. "Look at me, just once more," she begged. But Ethan, fighting his breaking heart, kept his gaze fixed on the horizon. To look back would shatter his resolve. And so, without another word, he rode into the morning, the dust of the desert swallowing him whole. Clara stood in the road, her gown whipping in the wind, her hand still outstretched as though the echo of his touch might linger. Around her, the town stirred awake. People would whisper soon, as they always had. They would say the drifter was gone, that the mayor's daughter had been a fool to love him. But Clara knew better. What they shared was real, too fierce for the world to hold.